What do you think is the real purpose of sleep?
I think we can take a look at this question from many different angles. Physiologically, sleep is a time when our body goes into hyper repair mode. Psychological aspect of sleep, about integrating our learnings in a day, about processing and integrating the things of our experience. Spiritual aspects of sleep is when we step away from this game of life. We step away from the dream of form and change and activity, and we enter into several different states. So first we go in through the dream state.
For many people out there, what are some external things that they can do to help them sleep better?
There's two arenas that we can look at: before sleep and after sleep. In other words, upon waking up. Okay. While exercise is actually really good for sleep, it depends on when you do it.
Welcome, Boris.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure as always.
Awesome. So today we are covering the topic of sleep, a very interesting and not so talked about topic, yet there's many different dimensions to it. So let's kick off today with the question of, what do you think is the real purpose of sleep? Why do you think humans sleep?
Yeah, I think we can take a look at this question from many different angles. I'm going to just kind of touch on the most common understanding. So physiologically, sleep is a time when our body goes into hyper repair mode. So that's the time when all of the damage that's done to our body during the day, and there's a lot of damage. There's oxidative damage, like different toxicities that enter the system. We might have bumped or bruised ourselves, and even if we haven't, just the movement of body through gravity in a daily basis creates various frictions and creates micro destructions, we can say, or micro tears, micro damage in our body. And so during sleep, this is when the body goes into that space where it starts to change and take out all of the damaged cells, take out all of the toxicity, and basically restore the body through rebuilding the protein. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but sometimes if you don't get good sleep, you can wake up feeling very sore, right? So that experience of soreness is the experience of the repair not actually happening. And so you're now you have some debt from the previous day that's added on into your new day. So that's one, right? Is just the physiological aspect of it. Then we can take a look at the psychological aspect of sleep, which is about integrating our learnings in a day, about processing and integrating the things of our experience. So various emotions, various decisions, various learnings that we've had in sense impressions. It's thought that during sleep, this is when our psyche begins to really integrate those lessons. Some of those things that are going to be stored, going to our subconscious mind, going to our long-term memory, various tasks like that are performed psychologically. That's why when you deprive somebody of sleep for a long time, especially, extended periods of time, many different things happen psychologically, even to the point of what we can say like schizophrenia, where a person just starts to feel quite disassociated even from within themselves. And the last one I would say is the spiritual aspects of sleep. So it's thought that in sleep is when we, as what we truly are, we step away from this game of life. We step away from the dream of form and change and activity, and we enter into several different states. So first we go in through the dream state, which is associated with the astral realm, which is again associated with the integration of what has happened during the day. That's why you see scenes of different aspects of your life in your dreams as your being is making sense of them and weaving them into your narrative. But beyond that, then we have this sense of deep sleep. And in deep sleep, our sense of personhood, our sense of character, who we are, disappears entirely. It's not just modified as it is in a dream state to perhaps be in different times or even as different personalities, but instead it disappears entirely. And this thought that this is the time that truly restores us, that truly gives us energy again, that truly gives us life again, because it is a time when we can step away from the game and then come back refreshed, come back and almost to be born again into another lifetime for another day. Yeah.
I love it. So is there a optimal time that somebody should be sleeping during the day? I mean, during the night? Is there an optimal time that somebody should be sleeping?
An optimal number of hours?
Yes. Is there an optimal number of hours? Or is it different depending on the person?
Yeah. So there's two schools of thought. One is based on the studies that have been done over and over and over again, and the meta-analyses of these studies that show that indeed the time that is required for an adult to sleep is 7 to 8 hours. But we have to also understand where these studies are coming from. Who is being studied? The people who are being studied are not calibrated in any kind of way, right? So what's basically happening is that it is just the average run-of-the-mill people, like it could be you and me, but in the same study, there could also be people with severe sickness. There could also be people who are experiencing intense stress in their lives. There could be people of all ages, people from different ethnicities. And when we start to understand that the participants of all studies, we can basically say this about all of the literature that's coming out in the scientific community. They're not calibrated. Most of the time, they're calibrated, if they are, on 1 or 2 parameters, such as, age range, ethnicity, it could be. But they're not calibrated on their lifestyle parameters. Are they single? Are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have aged parents? How are they involved in all of their relationships and their work? So we don't know these things. And what we can say in a general sense is that most of people that are in these studies are stressed people. They are people who are experiencing various forms of, I don't want to say malnutrition in the sense that they're hungry, malnutrition in the sense that they don't have all of the required nutrients in their body, in their mind, to function optimally. And also, they don't have various processes in their life that could compensate for the stress that they're experiencing. So what we can say overall is that this number of hours, 7 to 8 hours, is a requirement for people who are not really paying much attention to their nutrition or supplementation, not really paying much attention to their lifestyle factors, such as meditation, different stress reduction, mood regulation. So yes, that's one standard that we can follow. But for most people who have taken on this path of health, this path of kind of self-empowerment, saying, hey, I'm going to take control of my life. I'm going to do something good for myself. So as that begins to enter the picture, then the picture changes. So we have, let's say even from the spiritual side of the conversation, it is thought that when a person meditates a lot in their day, or when especially when they become a long-time meditator, their requirement for sleep drops. And personally, I've had this experience, perhaps you too, at retreats. As for example, those 10-day retreats that we've done, we're meditating 8 hours a day. Suddenly, in a short period of time, we start to feel like, it starts to feel, you're feeling rested, you're feeling different than your regular kind of routine. So based on that, we can say that the number of hours that the individual needs depends more on this factor that we can call restfulness, getting rest, versus sleep as a general sense of like you just being in bed, because you can be in bed for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours and not get rest. Why? Because maybe your breathing is compromised. Maybe you have had certain inputs, so different toxicities in you the night before. Or it could simply be that the environment in which you try to find your rest, in which you sleep, is actually aggravating you. Maybe there's sounds, maybe there's lights, maybe there's smells, maybe there is a lack of oxygen circulating there. And so you may be there for 8, 9, 10 hours, but you wake up feeling tired. You still can wake up feeling sore because the repair processes have not happened because there was various insufficiencies.
Got it. So it sounds like there's internal factors that you were talking about and then external factors. I'd like to touch on the internal factors later, maybe. But for many people out there, what are some external things that they can do to help them sleep better?
Yeah, so...
You touched in on a few of them, such as light and sound.
Yes.
Maybe you can give some tips around that.
Yeah, I wanted to let's maybe position it in this way. So there's two arenas that we can look at: before sleep and after sleep. In other words, upon waking up. Okay, so let's look at this. What can people do to optimize that experience before sleep? So let's start with the ones we mentioned. Light, right? So light is the main, we can say, factor in triggering or signaling our melatonin production. So melatonin is the hormone neurotransmitter that is responsible for a sense of sleep coming on, the sleep onset. Okay,
Is that triggered at a certain time in the day?
Well, it's triggered
or at night
based on the presence or absence of light. So yes, traditionally, if we had no electricity around us, it would be triggered at sunset. That's when melatonin production would begin, and then it would ramp up until about 10 p.m. And then basically melatonin continues to take you through the night, and that's the ingredient, or sorry, that's the neurotransmitter that then turns into serotonin upon waking up, and that's the transformation that actually starts to wake you up. But also during sleep, melatonin turns into DMT in our brain. And this is what facilitates our dream-like experiences, which are very, we can almost say like they're psychedelic experiences of seeing other realities. So, light plays a very important factor. So even when there's sunset and we have light inside, and for this, we've come up recently with many different hacks. So there's things like apps on your phone and on your computer that you can use to take away a specific band of light, which is called blue light. And this blue light is essentially that light that that triggers for us and also for plants and animals. That ray of light, that frequency of light, triggers wakefulness. It is actually an amazing frequency of light to use if you're feeling sleepy. To look into blue light, to have blue light shining on you, it creates alertness. So blue light is naturally a part of the different light bulbs that we have in our house, the screens that we look at. So there's apps like that, and there's also glasses that they're called blue blockers, and they're glasses that help to filter out some of this. But then if we want to take it really, into a very nurturing realm, then we'd go even beyond that. Then we'd actually dim all our lights, maybe a couple of hours before sleep. If we want to go even beyond that, then we would have some red light for our evenings. So something that mimics candles, or we could have candles and, of course, oil lamps, different things like this. They are very nurturing to our sense of sleep. They're very restful. So if we want to go deeper and deeper, we're taking away the light sources that are producing blue light, and we are cultivating light sources at night, just like we would be in our kind of primitive evolution stages, fire in our cave, right? So just a fire in your bedroom, whether it's like an oil lamp or a candle, to create that ambience of relaxation. Yeah.
Nice. So how about the internal things that you can do, such as meditation? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so internal things is basically to bring our mind into a more soothed state of being, right? Soothed state of mind. Typically, what happens right now is that most people go through the experience of entertainment or work right up until they go to sleep. So we may be watching a movie, watching Netflix, or we may be working and typing away at their computer. And so our mind is going. And so then we get to sleep, we lay in bed, well, the mind's still going. So we feel restless, our body wants to keep moving. It's the movement of the mind that is going to be producing the movement of the body. So how do we bring that to some stillness? Those are kind of the entry points into those internal factors that can contribute to sleep, being in sleep. So to slow down the mind, we can do a number of things. So one of the most basic things before sleep is to have like a journal by your bed. And so even if you have been working, even if you have been engaged in entertainment right up until sleep, this is the moment where you can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and write different things that are happening in your mind. And just that simple act of dumping it on a piece of paper. It could be your thoughts about that movie. It could be things that are left undone from work. Any of those things specifically that are left undone are those aspects that keep our mind going. Okay, so it's better to, just sit down and write it out and say, hey, I need to do this tomorrow, this, I'm thinking a lot about this, and as you do that, suddenly you will feel like there's space in the mind. And when you're complete with that, you can lay down, and there's a tremendously greater experience of the mind not being compulsively charged to go after these different topics, but, more responsive to you, as now you are saying, mind, I'm getting ready for sleep, and let's relax, let's go into our sleep, let's go into our rest.
So I personally have a few friends that typically go to the gym before they go to bed. Is that a good idea or a bad idea in your mind?
Yeah, typically for most people, it's not going to be an idea that fosters restful sleep. For a number of reasons. While exercise is actually really good for sleep, it depends on when you do it. And the dependent factors are really the hormones that get produced through exercise, right? So very often after exercise, what gets released is cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone, right? And another reason that it gets released is that after we exercise, our body gets inflamed. So cortisol is a powerful anti-inflammatory in the body. That's why if you have ever heard about people having like tennis elbow or golf elbow or various places where through overuse a joint gets inflamed, they do cortisone shots, which is basically a form of cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. Stress hormone, the cortisol, is proportionally opposite to the hormone of serotonin. So when cortisol is flooding the body, serotonin kind of goes offline. When serotonin is flooding the body, cortisol goes offline. So because we have flooded the body with cortisol from our sleep, our body is in more of an acute state of awareness, looking for dangers, again, because it evolved this way for survival. It didn't evolve this way so that you can, do your gym and, do whatever you want at some point of the day. So this experience of cortisol in the body, remember how we said that melatonin is a transformation of serotonin. So since serotonin is on shutdown and we have stress hormone in the body, we're actually creating a very unlikely scenario in which we can get restful sleep, right? So most likely what would happen is that you would stay awake for a while as this cortisol cycle shuts down. Now there's things that you could do to kind of circumvent that. The obvious one is, of course, exercise earlier in the day. So you want to give maybe about at least 3 to 4 hours before you sleep for your last kind of like hard exercise. We're not talking about walking outside, which is very good and actually entrancing. It helps you to find pace and to lull your body into restfulness, whereas exercise is the opposite of that. And another thing, of course, that we can do is we can do specific things to lower our cortisol. So what does that is taking in carbohydrates. So when you eat carbohydrates after you work out, this becomes as an interruption to the cortisol release. And when we do that, we can, again, carbohydrates do many different things, including becoming serotonin. So this is a good way that if you're exercising late and you're still trying to get to sleep, excuse me, then having some carbohydrates and even more sugary carbohydrates, kind of simple carbohydrates such as a fruit or something like this, really like a banana or even potatoes before sleep, it's very helpful to facilitate the kind of downregulation of the stress hormone and the upregulation again of serotonin and as it turns into melatonin for sleep.
Nice. So that's after, if you had a late night workout,
yes,
to refuel your body with carbohydrates. I've heard of that before. Now, what are your thoughts about people eating meals at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, or even sometimes right before bed.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? And then why don't you touch on the overall nutrition aspect of sleep?
Yeah. So meal times is a really good question. It's like meal times play such a big part in how our body, how our circadian rhythm works, how our body adjusts to the times of the day. So when we eat late, especially when we eat protein-based meals, especially with animal protein in there, which takes a long time to digest. So the digestive process for a meal to exit your stomach, a meal that has meats in it, heavy meals, so they can take up to 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours as it's being processed, and that is taking a lot of energy. So this is another thing that's often overlooked, is that the digestive process in the human body is the most energy intensive process. So while we think, oh, we're refueling ourselves, it's something about like 70 to 80% of our overall energy goes to digest food. Okay. So what you have just done, if you've eaten just before sleep, is you have put your body into a space where the body is very active for the next 3 to 4 hours, using a lot of energy to once again break down the food. If your experience is that you were, let's say, even like having very little food right up until that point, so that means you're almost kind of like your stomach is empty, you're really, really hungry, and then you eat that meal, that's great. But what happens is, because you were already low on glucose in your blood, what is the body going to do to get that energy to digest the meal before sleep? What it's going to do is it's going to have to release, once again, cortisol. And the reason that it releases cortisol is because cortisol assists in the breakdown of our body tissues. So what the body does preferentially to get more energy, if its energy is dipping past a certain threshold, is it goes after muscle tissue, and it starts to break down the muscle tissue for energy, for food. Okay, and cortisol is involved in that. So you've eaten a late meal, maybe you haven't eaten for a while, you're starving, you come home, you just want to eat before sleep. You've eaten that meal, you just triggered cortisol release. Cortisol release starts to break down your muscle tissue. The body has to deal with that food. It's not going to leave it in your stomach overnight. So it's digesting, it's using up a lot of energy. What is cortisol also doing? Cortisol is signaling to the body that there's danger. As you're digesting, cortisol is also trying to redirect blood flow away from your digestive organs, away from our viscera, towards the extremities. Why? Because again, it's a stress hormone that is helping us to fight, run, or hide. So we're doing activity. And so not only are you eating something, taking in a lot of energy, creating a lot of activity before sleep, you're also eating in a state that the body is actually, it's not ready for sleep. It's ready to react to a stressor, right? So very often you will end up with undigested food, bits of undigested food going through your stomach for hours. Do you know what happens when you leave food in a warm, wet environment for hours? If you do that on a sunny day, you leave it outside, you will see that it starts to basically decompose. It starts to putrefy, right? So we have putrefied matter. We're really creating toxicity in our body when we do that. So some ways to circumvent this, because again, it's a very bad practice in the sense that it taxes our body rather than adds anything. It takes away restfulness rather than creating restfulness, even though you may fall asleep because you just ate a big meal, but that's because of the lack of energy. Your body just, it's trying to use all the available energy that it can to remedy the situation that you just entered. So, of course, eating earlier is really important, so that you eat at least 4 hours, let's say at least 3 hours, but at least 4 hours, let's say, before you go to sleep. But if you are going to eat a late meal and you are basically coming out of a state where your blood sugar is already dipped, it's really important to bring your blood sugar up a little bit so that you don't trigger cortisol. At least you allow your body to digest this food without the stress hormone going around and trying to basically interrupt the process. And the way you do that is, just before you eat, let's say, that meal, you have a little bit of juice. a little bit of some very, very simple carbohydrate. It would normally spike your blood sugar, but this time it won't. You will take that juice and then you'll be able to eat. And that juice energy is going to be actually used to digest your food instead of your muscles being broken down to digest the food.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on hitting the snooze button in the morning, which I know ties into REM cycles, as well as taking naps during the day?
Nice. Well, it really depends on what your purpose is, right? It's like if we have different agendas for our sleep, we can do different things in it. So in what agenda would it make sense to hit the snooze button, for example? One of the best agendas for that is if you're wanting to lucid dream or astral travel. So you would set your alarm quite a bit earlier, and then it wakes you up and you're still in the middle of your sleep cycle. You didn't complete your sleep cycle. So it's easy for you to fall back asleep. So you can hit that snooze button, fall back asleep, and you may fall into a dream. And if you're practicing conscious dreaming, then that will be a time where it is possible for you. It'd be easier for you to gain conscious control of your sleep, of your dream rather, and experience various whatever you want to do in that dream state, which is kind of a separate topic. But if your desire is for restfulness, then hitting the snooze button is the opposite of this. As you hit the snooze button, first of all, you just got interrupted in your sleep. Now you're hitting the snooze button. You think, oh, I'm not rested enough. I'm going to get more rest. Well, what's happening if you're just got woken up? You have already engaged in some of your waking processes. The body's eyes have seen some light. Light is entering. Melatonin production is changing. Cortisol is being released. Cortisol is supposed to be released in the morning to wake you up. It's another one of those hormones. So this is happening, but now you go back to sleep. And if you do that, you can imagine how much restfulness is left in that sleep. You now have stress hormone that's been triggered to help you wake up. You also have basically signal to your body that it's daytime. And typically those snooze rounds, they don't add restfulness. You would actually experience a lot more restfulness and repair and healing to your body if you set your alarm later. If you typically snooze 3 times for half an hour, then you just get that extra half hour and receive the benefits of sleep. And if you have to wake up at a particular time, right now there's a lot of these alarm clocks that are available that are looking at your kind of sleep cycle by your activity of how much your body's moving. And they can basically detect within a half-hour window where is your lightest sleep and wake you up from there. So you won't feel the need to snooze. If you wake up at the kind of completion of your sleep cycle, at the place where it naturally is starting to fade away, you'll wake up and you'll want to get up, versus you wake up and you want to hit the snooze button. That's happening because you've had ongoing experiences, at least in my opinion, you've had ongoing experiences of not getting rest. And so you keep on basically being rest deprived even though you've had sleep.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is the ultimate sleep supplement? If you were to create an ultimate sleep supplement, what would it consist of?
Yeah, so maybe I'll speak about this in general terms. What's important for that sleep process, right? What nutrients? Very important because this is the time, as we started in our conversation, this is the time when the body goes through its kind of hyperactivity of repair. Also hyperactivity of cleansing and detoxifying. It's very interesting also to note that during sleep, especially during deep sleep, something happens to our brain where our brain almost becomes as if it's in a machine wash cycle. It starts to, through all of its kind of tubes that it has running through it, it starts to pump the cerebrospinal fluid. So it goes into this so as if it's washing itself. So this is a really important also aspect of the restfulness. So how do we facilitate this? How do we facilitate the repair of the body, the repair of the brain, and also that sense of restfulness, the relaxation, the non-stress state, right? The first group that I would point out is the amino acids. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein. And what they do is they're actually the little branches, and they're called branch chain amino acids, that become parts of our body. They literally give the building material to our body in order to facilitate the repair. So taking some form of very easily digestible protein, so either it's true individual amino acids, or it is some form of powdered protein that is very easy to break down. If it's a plant-based protein, then it should be fermented, which makes it very easy to break down, or perhaps it could be whey protein. So these forms of protein go into the body, and it's almost inevitable that if you sleep and you get at least some rest with this kind of nutrition in you, you'll wake up and you won't feel sore. So at the very least, you won't be experiencing the aches and pains. So if that's something that is common for you, then this could be a game changer, because so much of our attention then gets drawn in our new day towards the old aches and pains. Okay. So the next aspect of that is to facilitate the repair and growth of brain neurons, right? Because this is, again, we were talked about that this is this time when information is getting integrated, learned skills are getting integrated. So to facilitate that, there are certain supplements and certain forms of nutrients that we can take that stimulate and signal what's called BDNF, which is basically, we can think about it as a fertilizer for the brain. It helps to accelerate and facilitate neuronal growth. Okay, so what kind of supplements can do that? One very powerful one is turmeric, curcumin. Curcumin can signal BDNF production in the brain, but apart from that, it can also help to quell and pacify all of the inflammation in the body. Okay, so that could be, again, that angle of taking, to prevent what so much of our, especially elderly society right now is experiencing, which is all the various forms of brain degeneration, right? The dementia, Alzheimer's, even Parkinson's. So these conditions can be very much helped, especially helped by preventing them early on, by facilitating our body in such a way that our brain gets to continuously repair itself. And then the third aspect is this aspect of calm, of the non-stress state. So this would be another form of nutrients, or another group, we can say, of nutrients that we can take to just help the body to relax, to help the body to turn off the production of stress hormones and facilitate the production of neurotransmitters such as GABA, which is essentially a neurotransmitter of relaxation, of restfulness. So various kinds of supplements exist for that purpose. One of my favorite ones is holy basil. So holy basil is a supplement that is incredible at turning off stress in the body. So turning off stress is not the same as inducing sleepiness, which maybe we can talk in the fourth category. Turning off stress is can produce a sense of relaxation, but it's not going to produce a sense of drowsiness. So sometimes people have trouble falling asleep in that onset of sleep, and that's really to do with feeling drowsy. Okay, so the stress reducing supplements, the stress reducing nutrients, these are things, again, if we want to keep it simple, it's just some carbohydrates. So when we give some carbohydrates, the body naturally produces serotonin. It helps with the melatonin production, and we can get a sense of pacification of any kind of stress. That's why sometimes we know that when people are very stressed, and we call kind of the stress eating, right? Very often it's sweet things that we want to eat when we're stressed, because we know naturally, intuitively, instinctually, that it will basically quell our stress hormones. And the last category, those kind of drowsy aspects of sleep, the drowsy nutrients. For this, it exists a whole kind of spectrum of herbs. There's different things like lemon balm, skullcap, valerian root. All of these basically, in one way or another, work with the GABA channel. So they, in one way or another, facilitate or upregulate the production of GABA, which helps us to sleep. And we can, of course, take GABA directly. Some controversy about that, in the sense that it doesn't seem to pass the blood-brain barrier. But yet people take it and they report that they feel drowsy and sleepy. So for some people, it can work really well. For other people, it's better to take those herbs, for example, that facilitate our natural production of GABA. And likewise also with melatonin. Melatonin is the kind of the king, let's say, supplement of inducing drowsiness, inducing sleep.
Nice. So for our audience out there, what would you recommend if somebody comes to you with a sleep issue? I know you have a product out and you have a sleep course out too now, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's
Maybe you
correct.
can touch on that. So,
yeah, great. So the product is called Conscious Sleep. And Conscious Sleep is a blend of amino acids, these botanical extracts, some of which we've mentioned, and melatonin. So it is basically, I like to think about it, and we've talked about this before, as holistic synergy. Synergy is the idea that as we come together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? So in and of themselves, you can take all of these supplements individually, or ingredients individually, and get benefit. But when you put them together, when you enact all of them at once, what happens is that the body's processes, multiple processes are triggered all at once. The repair, the drowsiness, the turning off of the stress response. And when you do that, you suddenly have, it's almost like, sometimes I like this image of the demolition of a building, because you might think, okay, how am I going to take down this giant building? But when you know where to place the, let's say the detonators, right? And you place them in the correct location, suddenly this huge thing that doesn't seem to be movable folds in on its own, folds right into itself without harming anything else around it. So it's a similar idea. It's up there used in destruction. Here we're using it in construction of the body, in facilitation of the sleep state. So through holistic synergy, and that's conscious sleep. And along with Conscious Sleep, we offer that Conscious Sleep Solution, which is a mini course that's looking at some of the topics that we talked about today, but also going in depth about what can you actually do? What are those small wins? And I really wanted to dial it in on those things that take the least amount of effort, right? Because I know we're all so busy. We don't want to, basically like have a life makeover. Although it could be worthwhile, because sleep is it's really the biggest nutrient. It's the thing that makes us the brightest. It's the thing that makes us the healthiest. All of the repair, our very immune system depends on how we sleep. And nonetheless, we're involved in so many aspects of our life. So I wanted to point out those quick wins where somebody can just make a small adjustment and get a lot of the benefits. So some of these things that I talk about in the course are not directly related to sleep. They're not sleep rules such as turn off your lights or, make sure that there's no loud sounds.
People can Google the top 10 ways to fall asleep and find that information.
Right. So this is different than that. What we're really looking at is how do we optimize those metabolic pathways in the body that are related to sleep. So, for example, I talk about hydration in a way, such as adding trace minerals to the water or adding Himalayan salt to your water throughout the day, not before sleep, but throughout the day, to basically sensitize your hormone receptors so that things like melatonin work so much better. Things like serotonin work so much better. Things like insulin works so much better. And insulin is very important because it is actually a master programming hormone. So if our insulin sensitivity is low, then we end up having all kinds of basically hormonal imbalances in other hormone systems. So we talk about things like that may seem peripheral, but I basically show how it's integrated and how it relates to sleep. And it's something that we can do just on the go without really making any kind of large changes to our life or to our schedule.
Awesome. And where can people find this?
People can head over to myconscioushealth.com and they'll see it right there on the homepage.
Awesome. Pleasure, Boris. Thank you so much. Some great advice on sleep. Hopefully everybody takes a few nuggets from this and implements it. The biggest key is to really implement these small tips. And I would start with 1 or 2. You can rewind and watch a few of these conversations that Boris and I had today. And best of luck. Hopefully you guys have some deep sleeps.
Thank you.
Thank you.